So welcome everyone very briefly, and we're going to get going immediately with a short, I'd like to call it a short mindful meditation stroke visualization process, but we're going to start off initially just by a bit of stillness and quiet. So bringing your attention to your posture and making sure that you're comfortable, you're not straining anything. You may feel comfortable closing your eyes, or you may decide to leave your eyes open, whatever feels right for you right now. And use this moment as an opportunity to give yourself a bit of self-care by just becoming quiet and still and being in this moment. Thank you, everybody. So this morning, I ran the first taster session, and as I sat here in a very unplanned kind of way, I noticed something on my table, literally in front of me, that really spoke to me, and I feel like sharing it again with you now. So this is what I noticed on my table. So a little vase with some flowers, but what I really noticed was this droopy flower. Yeah, and this idea that, well, it's droopy, it's a bit withered, it probably ran out of water at a time when it needed water. It needed more nourishment and nurturing than it was actually given. And my way of looking at this morning was to look again at this droopy flower and to actually look at it. And I touched it, I smelt it, and I looked at it again. And actually, even though it's droopy and a bit withered, it still has so much beauty in it. And there was also the question of what makes this one, or does this flower, is it any less or more beautiful than these other ones that are still standing pretty straight? And it reminded me of how I was feeling this morning, which was actually pretty withered. And if I'm honest, I'm still feeling pretty withered because I'm recovering from COVID. So I'm not feeling at my best. But it was that thing of like reframing that and thinking, well, yeah, I'm a bit withered. So what do I need right now? I need to self-care. And look at things a bit differently. So that was just a little example of how we can literally use what is in front of us at any moment to reframe how we're feeling. So I'd like to invite you to take part now in a little visual meditation. And can I just ask, do you all have access to a window in the room that you're in? Okay, I think everyone's nodding. Good. So you might want to move your chair away from your screen and move it somewhere where you can actually see out the window. You might not need to move at all, but the idea is to not focus on the screen for a while, but you're going to use the window that you've chosen like a frame. So in the same way that you might use a camera frame or a mobile phone frame, you're using the window as a frame. And I'd like to invite you to try to imagine that you've never actually seen outside this window before. Now, it's quite likely that all of you are very familiar with this window that you're looking out of. Not necessarily, however, it depends on where you're based right now. And I'd like to invite you to be like, or to pretend or to imagine that you're a very young child, and that you're looking out this window like a young child might, like with a child's mind, or what in mindfulness we often refer to as the beginner's mind. And the invitation is for you to initially look at what is in the foreground. So you've never seen anything like this before, looking at the foreground, and you're really curious. You're curious about the colors and the textures. You're curious about any shapes or patterns. You're also curious about the light. And now I'd like to invite you to look into the background as far as your eye can see. So again, this will be very, very different for everyone. See how far your gaze will go and bring your awareness to maybe a line that goes from left to right. So drawing a line between, if you can see the sky, like whatever else is in your picture, in your field of view, and the sky. Just be curious. Allow yourself to be curious. And now bring in your mind's eye, so in your imagination as well, try to imagine whatever it is you're looking at, what it would look like first thing in the morning and then last thing at night. Any changes that might occur. And now, in your mind's eye, imagine what it might look like as you go forward, maybe into next week or in 2 or 3 weeks' time. And then over 3, 4 months, so depending on where you are in the world, the seasons will be different. And then slowly over the next 12 months, and coming back to where we are now. And just for a moment, check in with how you're feeling right now. And also check in with any ideas or thoughts or images that have come to mind in relation to how what you've observed, what you've noticed, can potentially be used as a metaphor for how you experience life. So how things can change from morning till night, from 1 week to the next, from 1 month to the next, from one season to the next. How any movement or changes that sometimes can be very drastic. Sometimes the weather might be incredibly stormy suddenly and then can be really calm again. And how can that be used as a way of seeing your life, your ups and downs maybe, or the way you experience life a bit differently, and how you deal with the changes in your life? And you may at this point just want to get out your camera or your phone, if you've brought one with you, and create an image or two of what it is that you've been looking at. There might be 1 or 2 things specifically that you want to create an image of, or just more in a broad sense, just as a way of remembering the activity, and there's something that you can potentially come back to. And also something that you can then do wherever you are, whether you're at home, at work, at a busy station, at a cafe. This kind of activity can be done absolutely anywhere. And what it is all about is about bringing your attention literally to this present moment, noticing. But if we don't slow down, if we don't allow ourselves moments of quiet and stillness, there is so much that we will miss. So, if we were running a normal workshop or offering a training session at this point, we would actually spend a lot more time doing this, and we'd go into breakout rooms, we'd have conversations online, or if we were in person in small groups, face to face. And then we would have a general conversation as well, and see what learning or inspiration or any insights that we might want to share with each other. And if there is anything you'd like to share with us today in relation to anything you felt or seen or experienced, any thoughts you've had, please feel free to write them in chat. And Louise or Christine will actually take a note of those and might read them out, or we can just read them as we go. Gosh, I've just seen what Ali's written. I saw a hummingbird. Wow, amazing. That's really amazing. Cool. Okay, so because Breanne needs to leave quite shortly, and thank you so much, Breanne. So Breanne was here this morning as well as a guest, and Breanne, I won't say anything about you. You can just introduce yourself, and you're very familiar with how this works now. So if you can let everyone know a little bit about you, why you decided to get into the mindful photography and how you now use it in your work, but also how it's helped you personally, as well as how you now use it in the work that you do as a coach, and in other work and in other services you offer.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. I'm excited to be here today because it has had such an impact on me. I was drawn to mindful photography because, well, I love photography. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and mindfulness and meditation wasn't really working for me. But when I came across this concept of combining photography with mindfulness, I thought that could work. And it did. So it really helped me with emotional regulation tools, really being able to be in the present moment, look at things in a completely different way. It changed my anxiety from I was making up stories in my head, I was fearful about certain things, and it enabled me to stop the catastrophizing and really slow down and look at things that were going on. So when I brought this work into being a coach, it really did help my clients' emotional regulation as well. And I've used this in a few ways as a coach. So I've used it one-to-one with people out in nature. I've used it for a local mental health charity who was doing a lot of projects on nature connection. And the mindful photography was really supportive in that environment as well. And I've also used it during general coaching. So it's been really helpful for people's coaching because it's helped people to look at their values and their strengths. People have been able to make images of what they want their life to look like, and to reflect on who they are. And what's been amazing about the photography that people are taking is when they reflect on themselves with the photography, they're able to make goals and look to the future. And then they're able to make images about what goals they want as well. And when they print those images out and they see the photos that they've taken, they're transported back to the feelings that they had when they took them. So I'm really finding that it's reigniting the motivation that people are feeling to make the change that they want in their lives. And for grief, I'm a grief and resilience coach. For grief, it's really helping people move forwards but not forget their loved one, because people don't want to move forwards because it feels like they're leaving their loved one behind. Whereas mindful photography has really been a great tool for them to explore the continuing connection and how they can move forwards alongside it.
Thank you so much, Breanne. I really appreciate what you've just shared, and pleasure to be with you again. And Breanne is one of our, I would describe as one of our core community members, in that we have a regular meetup. It's 4 times a year now. We do it quarterly, where people come and share what they're doing. They offer each other support and insights. We advise each other. We support each other. All kinds of things. And I mean, well, Louise and Christine might say a bit more about that as well. But I know, Breanne, you need to leave, and leave whenever you're ready. Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch with you soon. So I'm going to now offer a little presentation that gives a few more little taster ideas, and also a little bit more about what our approach to mindful photography is. And and also talk a little bit about the actual training program before Louise and Christine come in. So, okay, can you see that? Hopefully. Okay. So, I chose to start off the presentation with a photograph of me, not because I like taking photographs of myself, because I really don't, but this is part of my story. Basically, I use mindful photography myself for my own health, my own well-being. So I've had a story of mental health challenges at times where I suffer from anxiety, and I've had episodes of depression. Very recently found out that actually I have ADHD, and that has made so much sense to me in how I experience the world, but also in what I do and what I love doing, and also what I find really, really challenging. So this was me. I was actually in a woodland on a retreat about a year ago. In fact, it was literally a year ago. And I came across a little mirror in this woodland, and I was called to this mirror, and I thought, I've got to go there, even though it felt really, really uncomfortable. When I thought, no, I'm going to go there and I'm going to have a look again at Ruth. And I went and I spent about half an hour looking at myself, and it was really, really difficult. But actually, I noticed how things changed over time. And then eventually I got my camera out, and this is one of the images I took. So the reason I shared it really was that it's mirrored. Yeah, it's mirrored. And I had to be very mindful in the process, but also in the creation of this actual image to get it in a way that, well, that looked like that. But it was the process that was really important. Okay, so I've shared a little bit about my story, but this is gives an example. I mean, if you look at my Instagram feed, it looks a bit like this. It's quite colourful, but it's kind of these are all images that I've created within the last 4 months. So this is how I actually use for mindful photography for myself. Everyone who does the training or anyone who comes on any of our workshops will use it a bit differently, and that's the great thing about it, because what the approach we use is so adaptable. But you can see here that, I love animals. I love nature. I spend a lot of time in nature. I really truly believe in the importance of diversity in its really broad sense. Um, and also there's quite a lot of me on my own there, and that's about, for me, the importance of having time of solitude, so times of quiet and solitude, but not being afraid anymore to place myself, to become more visible myself in that process, which is something that I used to really struggle with. So that gives you a sense, and also I mean, we haven't got every single one of these images has a story to it. But in a nutshell, this is the story of the last 4 months, but some of it actually relates to my future story as well. It relates to things that are important to me in terms of thinking about my future, visioning, imagining my future, and trusting that things will come my way that will then actually help me in terms of creating that future. Yeah, so that felt important to share with you. So what is mindful photography? So mindful photography is lots of different things to lots of different people, but I'm going to speak about what the look again approach to mindful photography. And a really, really important part of it is that it's not about the tech. It's not about how the images look. It's actually about the process of slowing down, of looking, and then looking again and seeing. And as a result of that, being able to reframe the moment, how we're feeling, if we don't necessarily need to, but if we need to reframe something, we can use what we see to reframe what we're feeling, how we're experiencing life, and then do things differently going forward. In terms of the process and the tools that we use, it's very much a weaving between mindfulness, creativity, and in this case, particularly photography, and also nature connection. And when I say nature connection, I mean not just going for a walk. I mean really connecting and engaging and learning from nature as well. And it's mindful photography is a tool. It's a tool that helps us to become more consciously aware of and connected to the present moment. But the way that we experience this is coming from a place of non-judgment and with gratitude and also compassion for ourselves, others, and the world around us. And it's quite active. So even though in that moment we're often quite still, quiet, there might be other people around it that might be really noisy, but we find a quietness in ourselves. The point is also that after that we think, okay, so how can I use this? What action can I take going forward? So, oh, hang on. No, that's okay. So the sense is that, by seeing differently, we can be different. And by being differently, we can then do differently. That's the kind of process. But why do I do this? And why do we at Look Again do this? So for me personally, I've always been really interested and engaged with the bigger picture. So this is about me as an individual, but it's also about the bigger picture, literally what's going on in the world right now. And I get really affected by what's going on, by the polycrisis that we're facing, not just climate change, but everything else that we're facing as well. And this affects how I experience my life here in the UK, in the moment, here in my kitchen, at my kitchen table. It's kind of it's from that individual to the global. And so for me, it's about using mindful photography for inner change in order to then be able to do differently in terms of the outer change that is necessary as we engage in the world, whether it's our communities or whatever that might be. So I actually drew a little diagram in 2012 that looked just like this, but it was just on a scrappy piece of paper. Basically, this is about the simplicity of looking up, looking down, looking left, looking right, looking around. And that's kind of where it all started, really. It's very, very simple. But then as it's grown and my ideas have grown and the methodology has grown, the idea is that we really do use it to look in as well as look out. We zoom right in and we zoom out. We look at the detail, we look at the big picture, we come in as an individual and we go out to the global. So you can see this, there's a lot of movement and a lot of action in that. Now, the methodology is evidence-based in that we've been working with the University of Gloucestershire, we did do for about 3 years. And it's shown to, what we've created has shown to reduce anxiety and depression specifically, and also reduce isolation and loneliness. We've worked with well over 3,000 people now, actually, and 134 people from 27 countries have completed our training over the last 3 years. Christine, who is in this group, I think you were in the first group, or maybe it was the second. I can't remember now.
I was in the second.
You were in the second group, yeah. I think Louise was a bit later, and so was Breanne. And so most of that we've done it online as a result of starting this during lockdown. But last week we actually ran our first in-person 3-day training, which was great as well. So just a couple of other little tips or ideas that you might, these are very, very simple tools, again, that you can do wherever you are, however you're feeling. But if, say, you're feeling anxious in a moment, you can literally allow yourself to be still, to, consciously change maybe your position, just bring your awareness to that moment and just look down. Just look down at literally what is in front of you. So I did this last week sometime. I looked down, I was in my garden, I looked down and I saw a leaf on my table. And I saw the leaf. And then I looked again, and then I started to see the reflection of the sky in the table. And it gave me this sense of, I'm here on my own, but actually I'm part of something much bigger. And it gave me comfort, but I also felt a lot of calm. And then I literally just raised my head and looked up. And the photograph on the right is what I saw when I looked up. So, and that gave me a sense of, yes, I'm an individual human being, but I'm part of humanity. I'm part of this bigger picture. I'm not separate from it. And it gave me, again, it gave me a sense of belonging to something bigger than just me. These two photographs I created literally last week, when I was running the training program, the in-person one, not far from where I live here in Stroud in the UK. And we were doing an activity that related to new perspectives. And these two things just sort of came into my field of vision, and I noted them, and I kind of saw similarities. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't really think much about it. I was just really drawn to each of them. And then I was reflecting on them afterwards and thinking, and also based on what other people were sharing about some of their images. And I thought, which one of these two images, or whether it's the rose or the apple that's been bitten into, which one is the more beautiful? Who says which, and also why? And we could have a very long philosophical debate about which one is the more beautiful, and why and why not. But it was just, in its very simplistic form, it was as simple as that. It was looking at things with a fresh lens, with a new perspective. And then lots of when we do this in training, lots of conversation ensues as a result of what people see. So these are some of the people that were on our last cohort. There's people from, gosh, Spain, UK, USA, Canada, Australia, Philippines, and another, yeah, two from Spain actually. Oh yeah, and Ukraine as well. So it was a really lovely mixed group of people. They're not all in that photograph. Some of them weren't present at that point. But yeah, really lovely group of people. And what we do in the working with mindful photography training is we go from the slowing down to learning to see differently, learning to see new perspectives, to connecting with ourselves and others with compassion through the lens of a camera, and then using our eyes and photography to help us to build resilience in the face of uncertainty and change. And then really importantly, and I've said this already, but it's about, okay, so that helps me, but what action can I take? Where can I go with this for myself, but also for the others? And how can this lead to a future story of hope rather than one of fear? And this photograph, this little collage, was actually of the people last week who did the training. So a really lovely bunch of people. And you can see that, well, we were working indoors as well as outdoors, and we do this on the online program as well. So even though a lot of the activities, well, we encourage people to do them outdoors, but it's not always possible for people. Sometimes we have people in Australia and it's the middle of the night. In fact, Louise, when you did it, it was like middle of the night, right? It was dark outside in the Philippines. So, but everything is adaptable, and that's one of the beauties of this approach, is that we can adapt everything to suit our own circumstances and settings. So by the end of the program, people learn to not just create they learn to create and deliver their own mindful photography, but in a way that's appropriate and authentic to themselves and to their own professional setting. We learn a lot about a mindfulness-based facilitation process, and also there's a lot of connection that happens between the group during the 8 weeks, but also going forward, in that we continue to meet on a quarterly basis, and there's also WhatsApp groups and all other stuff as well. And you get to basically you get to learn the stuff that from the only evidence-based mindful photography training that, as far as I know, exists at the moment. I might be wrong, and if I am, please tell me. But as far as I know, that's the case. And you get a certificate of participation as well. Oh, and you get a one-to-one session with me. One of the really important things about the program is that as well as doing the different modules, so there's 8 modules, and every module has a different theme attached to it with lots of different learning materials. But the last 2 are like, okay, so I've kind of learned about what mindful photography is and different parts of it, but how am I actually going to use this in the communities that I work with? So we go through various models of delivery, looking at particularly like workshops or longer courses, partnership projects, social prescribing, which is quite big in the UK now, and it's starting to happen more in the US. I don't know if it's happening anywhere else, but and then also bespoke projects. But also people talk a lot more about this in smaller groups, in breakout rooms, and we get to know each other's practices, and it's very, very interactive. So I wanted to share these 4 photographs, which I created just a few weeks ago now. One of my colleagues actually was visiting from Denmark, and we were going through a mindful photography process together. And this was kind of what my process was. Now, at the time, I was feeling a bit wobbled and a bit like a bit frayed around the edges. I was very tired. So that first image really spoke to me. But then it was like, okay, so despite feeling a bit chaotic and a bit this kind of grid of frustration as well, it was a sense of remembering the flourishing that comes through that grid, and not forgetting that, and to remember how far I've come personally. But the really important thing that I wanted to share with you today was the importance of not doing this alone. So I had this chair, I saw this chair there, and it was a chair on its own in that way. And it was really interesting because I often take or create images of chairs for some reason. I've got a bit of a thing about chairs. And I think it's often because it reminds me to sit down, or reminds me to stop and rest, which is something I find very difficult. But in this instance, when I created this image and when I was looking at it, it made me feel really sad, because I thought, how many chairs have you taken, Ruth, where it's just one chair, and it's a lot. And then I stepped back and I saw both chairs together, and I saw them facing each other, and I thought, no, that is my future story. That is my future story. And this relates to how I'm now working, or how I'm wanting to work so much more in a collaborative way, with others that I'm meeting. Some of you are on this call. I mean, Christine will talk a bit in a minute as well about that, and some of you I've known for a long time. So it's this thing of, we don't have to do this work on our own. And the idea is that we all bring our talents, our gifts together, and together we co-create, and then the ripple effects can actually go far, far wider. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you on the presentation. I think Louise has put my email and the website in the chat, so I don't need that anyway. Thank you for that. Now, I hope that hasn't been too boring. I really want to hear from. Let's start with Louise, because it's really late for you, Louise, and you might want to drop off the call because it's gone midnight, or it's actually nearly 1 for you now. And then we'll have Christine. So Louise, please introduce yourself and how you're now using the training in the communities that you work with.
Thanks, Ruth, for having me here, inviting me here, and everyone who's here to experience a taster of mindful photography. So I'm Louise Far. I'm from the Philippines, and I practice a mindful, contemplative, heart-guided approach in photography. I started off as a documentary photographer, so it's really about photo documenting the lives of people, of places, of communities, and of different initiatives. So sustainable initiatives, actually, with the attempt that, yeah, maybe we can show that what we dream of, say, as a community or as a country, it already exists. It's a matter of showing it. But then, you know, it doesn't stop there. So there are other layers to this kind of work. So I met the contemplative approaches. I also met different kinds of mindfulness and even the mindfulness-based programs for depression, anxiety, and stress. And then there's also biographical work. So my photography has already involved showing lives of different people and also portraits. But at the same time, there is that aspect of what is really there to be seen in the life of a person and for who the person is. So it came to a point wherein it's all getting overwhelming in terms of what I can see. And I'm also curious what I'm not seeing. And it just came timely that I met Ruth because we were in the same place at the same time in Stroud. I was there for an artistic residency, and so I've been carrying so many questions, but primarily one has to do with how can I make the invisible visible, and so what is it really that I'm not seeing here just yet? And with mindful photography, it kind of helped me to bring it all together, to also pause and see the big picture, the small picture, and whatever is in between there, and to also revisit my own photographic practice. So for me, it's an affirmation of the work that I've been doing, of the journey so far. And I find it really practical. And now, in the age of technology, you know, there's AI and we have all these devices, but can we really tune in or attune our being human so that we can live our lives truly, fully, and through a mindful photography practice. So, yeah, I've for this year, there have been projects which involve mindful photography. Like there's an online thing that went for 3 Thursdays, and it's about seeing things or seeing fresh, seeing anew, and it it had a good reception with the people who attended the sessions, and some of them are also creatives, so they have their own practice, but this is also something that they're curious how it can be integrated in their current work. And then just recently, so I was in the southern Philippines for a face-to-face workshop, which has to do with making sense of our lives. So it's an introductory to a biographical review. So how can we also see our lives from different lens, perhaps, and also maybe through nature. So we were in a farm with fruit-bearing trees, and really mindful seeing has been helpful in also seeing what is there and what's not readily or easily there, and trying to connect that with who we are as human beings, or you know, like what is it that we find similarities with, say, a leaf, whether that's alive or dead. And
Mm.
so yeah, that's how I've been using this practice, and hopefully this also continues with more people as well.
Thank you so much, Louise, for sharing that. It's always a pleasure to work with you on these things. And Louise and I have all kinds of ideas for the future as well, don't we, Louise? That we talk about now and again. And yeah, okay, thank you. And Louise, please do feel free to drop off if you need to or would like to. Thank you. So Christine, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. Where are
Yes,
you from? And tell us a bit about who you are and why mindful photography and how you're using it now and going forward.
yes, thank you. And yes, as Louise said, thank you for having us and bringing us all together, Ruth. So I'm Christine Baker, and I'm joining from Ohio in the US. And I've I have one of those careers that has kind of circled around. I started as an art historian. I've worked in the visual arts, education, and now I own a small consulting firm that does organizational development work for nonprofits throughout the US. And I'm also a self-taught photographer. I carry a camera everywhere. And I one day several years ago was on a walk and became fascinated with the light coming down through the leaves and stood there for what felt like a long time and took a whole bunch of pictures. And I just realized that something special had happened, but I didn't really know what it was. So in my Google search, I found mindful photography and I found Ruth, and I thought, oh, this sounds fantastic. I'm going to sign up. So I really didn't know what I had discovered. But since I did the training in 2022, things have changed really deeply for me. The two things that I carry with me now are the idea of what it means to slow down. I was a typical nonprofit professional raising my kids, and I was going. And really that reminder of what happens when you just take time and slow down and don't need to move on until you're ready, until you feel called. I see that now rippling throughout my life in many ways, which I'll talk about in a minute. And also the invitation to notice. As a trained art historian, I was taught to look for details and make connections and find patterns. But really, what it feels like in your body to kind of turn that autopilot off and just take the time to really look at what's around you, all the details, all the beautiful things that are there that, I just walked past before. So I really embraced it. I also felt, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Ruth, but I think this is an important part of my story. I joined the cohort and I was so excited. And I got to the first session and everyone was introducing themselves as, professional photographers and licensed therapists. And I thought, oh my gosh, where, I am in way over my head. But what I so appreciate about Ruth and the community is that it's really a place to be mindful curious and to really discover how to make mindfulness work for you and really find a way that it fits into your life. So I really also appreciate that about the community and what Ruth has taught us. And so how does this connect with what I'm doing now? So in my consulting work, I've really started, most of my clients are doing really complex social justice systems change work. And I've watched so many of my colleagues burn out and really just find that it just becomes overwhelming. And so I've started to build into my work with my clients really room for contemplation and rest and reflection. Because what I'm also finding is that when we allow ourselves to have those spaces to do complex work, we are able to do the work better. We're able to think more deeply about the possibilities. We're able to come up with answers that maybe we wouldn't have had time to think about before. And I also find that space, allowing ourselves to have space for rest and reflection, really lets us think about, well, how do we bring ourselves into the work? How do we show up in community? How are we present? How can we develop relationships without judgment? How can we really be our better selves? So I've found that bringing that into strategy design and evaluation practice, which at first might not seem like it really connects, it really brings my clients to a deeper place just by giving them time to be curious. So, and Ruth is coming to visit soon, and we're going to kind of work through some ideas and see if we can start piloting some ideas for how we can really bring these ideas into this nonprofit consulting space. So, so thankful I found Ruth in a Google search 4 years ago now.
Very grateful for Google, but more importantly,
Right.
Christine.
Right.
Thank you so much. And I mean, I think that, these three stories that you've heard, these very, very human, personal, but also professional stories, they're all so different. And if we had other people coming to join us today who've done the training, there'd be people who are full-on photographers, professional photographers working as photographers. some in even quite commercial settings, and a lot in very much community settings. Would have therapists, would have teachers, with all kinds of different creative and well-being related professions of one sort or another. And something that I think joined us all together is something about values. This isn't just about us. This is about what we can do, how we can use these tools to create something healthier, more nourishing, and better going forward into the future in this crazy but beautiful world that we live in. So I'll stop there, but we still have a bit of time. So we have plenty of time for any questions. If anyone wants to find out more about the actual training, I can actually give a bit more detail about how it actually works, like kind of week to week, if that would be of any interest. Or please just, unmute yourselves and ask away. Or share anything you'd like to share about how you're feeling or what you've experienced, or any thoughts you're having right now. Come on, don't be shy.
So can I say that?
Please, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So hi, I've been following everybody on the Facebook group, and that's, I think, how we all connected. I found, I think, mindful photography very unknowingly during the lockdown when I was clicking photographs of my world in the small space that we were all confined in. Yeah, but unknowingly, it has really helped me to connect with myself and bring peace to myself during, especially those tough 2 years that we had. And I'm excited to know more, because the world needs something like this. And, the mindful photography is something that I think anybody can do. As the minute they understand a little bit about it, I think it can make a change. So yeah, one day I am definitely joining you, Ruth, one of the courses soon.
That would be lovely. I would love that. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Would it be helpful if I shared a little bit more about how it actually works from one week to the next? Okay. So, right, how does it work? So it runs over, it starts on the 3rd of October this year. It runs over 8 weeks. There's 7 modules. So the first week is module 1, and it's very introductory, and it's all around what is mindful photography, and we put it in context. We also look at what good facilitation is, or a mindful approach to facilitation. And right from the start, we introduce actual practices. So every single session has practices. We're starting off with learning to see. Each session is 4 hours, so it sounds like a long time. It's 1 till 1 till 5 UK time. But a lot of the time is spent away from the screen whilst you're actually doing your practices. So people go away from the screen, and then we come back together in breakouts or in the larger group. So week 1 I've done. Week 2, module 2, is we're looking more specifically at seeing from different perspectives. And there's lots of tools that we have for that, lots of specific activities. And we're learning from the theoretical perspective. We're learning more around what the Look Again methodology is, how it works, and the facilitation frameworks that are part of that, as well as the research that backs it up. Week 3, where we go into more the connection side of things. So how we use photography and the ourselves to connect in a more compassionate way to ourselves, but not just to ourselves, towards others and the wider world around us. Week 4, we're looking more specifically at nature connection, and not just connect. It's not about just like connecting, as I said, I think earlier, it's about really engaging and learning from nature. And that we try and include that throughout the whole program in terms of, we encourage people to be outside and to work with nature as much as possible. But this is a more specific, a specific one, and we're looking at themes like change and growth and transition and themes like that. The fifth week, we're looking more specifically at resilience and how we can use our eyes, and we've got a particular framework that we use for that called the 7 C's. And then the last 2 weeks, we move into, the last 2 modules, it's more about, okay, so we know all this stuff now, we've experienced it, we've done it, how are we going to actually adapt this and take it into our work into the communities that we serve? So it's models of delivery, it's a kind of good practice. There's a whole load of stuff that we do. How do we structure it? What do we include? What don't? Have the timings? There's a lot of there's a lot of material there, but also a lot of that time, and in fact, a lot of the time for all of the groups is spent on the communication and learning from each other. So everyone is bringing their gifts and their experience to the table. It's not about me just talking for 4 hours. That's the last thing I want. Yeah, it's very, very interactive. And one thing that happens from 1 week to the next is that at the beginning of the next week, we start off by reviewing the week before. So there's a sense of we review it and we look at reflections and posts that people have actually put on the online platform that we use from the week before as well. But then there's also an opportunity to practice facilitating some of the practices. And we do that at the beginning of each session. The last week we do a review of week 7, but also review of the whole thing, and we get much more into how we really do take this forward, and a lot of working, like sharing and inspiring each other. And then really importantly, at the end of the actual talk program, everyone has the opportunity to have a one-to-one session with me. It's like a consultation, whatever, where you bring your specific questions, and then we go through in a lot more detail how you can work with this. And that includes really practical things like, okay, so how can I earn some money from this? How can I recover the costs of the investment that I've made? And the idea is that you can actually recover the costs by running 2 or 3 workshops. It shouldn't take long or a lot of work for you to actually recover the cost. And talking of cost, so the standard fee for this is £14.95. So £1,495, say £1,500. However, we do, and you can pay that in 3 installments or one up front. However, we do have bursaries. We have bursaries that people can apply to, and it's on the website link that Louise has shared. You can click through, and at the bottom, you can find out about the, there's a form to fill out if you need a bursary. And the bursary is for people who are on a lower income, or for people who are, politically or geographically marginalised in one way, or for, who would really find it impossible or really, really difficult to cover the costs because of where they're living or their circumstances. So if you would like to apply for a bursary, please do. Have I missed anything out, Louise, Christine, in terms of I think we've mentioned already that going forward, so every cohort decides for themselves how they want to continue linking between themselves. Most groups set up their own WhatsApp group, for example, but there is also this ongoing community which is free. Well, at the moment it's free, and for the foreseeable future it will be free. It's a way of reconnecting or connecting with each other, like the cohort that you've been part of, but also all the other people who have done the training, and it's a way of continuing to learn from each other and share, etc., and celebrate as well, celebrate what we do. So yeah, that kind of hopefully sums it up. Do we have any questions? Dorka, it looks like you've just arrived, and I'm really sorry. Maybe you got the timings like the I don't know what time zone you're in, but apologies if it wasn't clear from my behalf. But it's nice that you've made it, and I am recording this, so you'll get a receipt of the recording if you'd like one.